Hello and welcome everybody to Booze Hour Cloud Edition today. Today I've got on a couple of really special guests from F5 Labs, one of whom you've already met on the Monday weekly update with Daryl and Boo, which is Katie Newbold, and we also have on Dave Warburton as well. And we'll have a really interesting conversation on a free tool that they just released called Cryptonice, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But before I start that, there are, looks like a number of folks that are joining us from LinkedIn right now. So if you're on LinkedIn right now, please leave a comment just to say hi and let us know where you're watching from. I'd be interested to see where everybody is. It has been interesting in that, and I'll mention this. I posted about this yesterday on my Twitter, but this is the last couple. Hold on. Come on. This is the last couple of stickers that I have left. Where are they? There they are. It's been interesting to send them out because I'm mailing them out by hand. Anybody who's received them sees that I'm writing them out. There isn't as much as you would think that this is a really professional operation where I've outsourced all of the sticker distribution. That's not the case. I actually mail these out by hand with stamps, and it's been interesting to see who I've been mailing this to as far as where you're located. So. Please do leave a comment as to where you're watching from. So that said, these stickers, this is the last batch of stickers that I have here. And so if you would like a sticker, just ping me. You could DM me on Twitter. It's @Boolam. You can ping me on LinkedIn here, or you can email me, boo@f5.com. Just put in the title subscriber, put in a mailing address that you want me to send these to, and I will get them out to you. A couple other things. Let's see here. We got our weekly technical newsletter. So Daryl's weekly technical newsletter, if you receive this directly from Daryl, that is the last one was actually on this Monday. So to continue receiving the weekly newsletter, head over to darylandboo.com, put a name and email address on there, and you'll continue receiving that newsletter. Anybody who was getting Daryl's direct newsletter will be getting a monthly newsletter instead. That's just a bit more of a high-level summary as opposed to all the technical detail that we're putting into the weekly one. And then with this weekly kind of streamlined email newsletter, I'll be able to actually put a little bit more focus into it because it'll be an easier effort. Let's put it that way to put its effort into the one platform. What else? On darylandboo.com, if you head there is an event calendar. So along the top of the page, there's a tab, and one of the tab headings there will say event calendar. So you can check out all of the future content that's coming out. If you look on there, I keep that fairly updated. We got about a week worth of stuff that's planned out that's on there. Also, if you're watching via LinkedIn right now, you can go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn and you'll see all the future content if you're not already following me. And if you're watching via YouTube right now, click on the subscribe button. That should be down here. And then you'll be able to see all the future content that's coming out as well. Let's see. That is about it for announcements. So without further ado, I will bring on our guests today, Dave and Katie. How's it going, guys?
How you doing,
Good.
Brady?
How are you?
Good. So Katie was on this Monday. Dave will be on hopefully on next week. We'll sort that out as far as time. My mistake. I didn't realize that most of our audience is from British Columbia, and next Monday is actually British Columbia Day. So nobody's going to be watching. Well, maybe some of our really dedicated viewers will be watching on BC Day, but my guess is that many of them will be enjoying their time off. So we'll sort out a time for that. But I will mention that Dave is probably our guest so far that hails from the furthest part. Most of our guests have been in North America, and you're way out in the UK, right?
I am, yeah. So if anyone knows the UK, it's just north of Birmingham, so fairly central to the country.
Okay.
I would say, once upon a time I would be traveling down south to London and all around actually. But of course these days, pretty much just stuck at home.
Oh, cool. Yeah, my in-laws are actually English, and my father-in-law is from Liverpool.
Oh, really?
And we got married out in England, actually. And my mother-in-law is actually Scottish.
Right.
And so interesting mix. And yeah,
So
my
you're a
my
Liverpool
wife.
fan?
Well, this year, yeah,
I
yeah.
was
I
gonna
don't know, who
say,
do
yeah.
you support?
I tend to not support anyone. That way, I can't really be
Okay.
too disappointed at any one point in time.
You could have jumped on the Liverpool bandwagon this year.
True.
That was pretty incredible. My father-in-law super excited about that. Like that midway through the season there, that was just really cool to see like what they've done
Yeah.
this year. For folks who don't get the context, like Liverpool had a record-setting year. Basically, went through the year losing 2 games or something like that, and tied a couple, but otherwise just went on a crazy win streak and only just lost their first home game, or maybe tied their first home game in the last couple of games of the season. Like just absolutely amazing to see. So yeah, my father-in-law was really happy about that. All right, and otherwise, so we'll have you on the next Monday. Katie, we've had on already and got to have a great chat with you. And you're both from the F5 Labs team, and have been working on a cool project. But maybe you can talk about what you've been doing at F5 Labs in general.
Yeah, so Labs has been going for a good couple of years now. Really, it kind of got started as a way of trying to help shift the needle in terms of helping both customers and non-customers recognize F5 as a true security company. You know, a lot of for those, I suppose, customers that do know F5 products, they recognize that some of the solutions that we've had are very much security focused. But F5 never really used to be known as the kind of go-to security company. So that's a big part of our kind of mission, really, to do that. And so in trying to do that, we produce free and hopefully actionable threat intelligence for both customers and non-customers to use. So anyone can go to f5labs.com, and we have articles on there that range from high-level pieces that are kind of intended for CISOs, or really any kind of, I would say, security lead, or even potentially anyone just interested in security in general. We have big report series that cover, you know, years worth of kind of breach trends, so we can see how threat actors are shifting their tactics, and hopefully provide guidance in terms of what people should be focusing their attention and money on from a security and control point of view. And then we have some super low level pieces as well that look at the kind of latest ransomware and financial malware. So hopefully it's a pretty broad spectrum of threat intelligence and security analysis on the site.
Yeah, cool. We just lost Katie there.
Yeah,
go figure. Live action stuff. Oh, she looks like she's back. She's back.
That's sorry about that. My Wi-Fi bombed up.
Okay, no worries. Just a quick note from Pasilva, sending on his support. Thank you. Peter, your stickers will be in the mail shortly as well. Cool. And so you guys have been working on a really cool project. Maybe we can talk about that and spend the rest of the live stream going over that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the long series of reports we've had, or long form reports we've had for years, is the TLS telemetry report. Again, from an F5 product point of view, we've been performing things like SSL offload and inspection for a long time. So we just had this kind of natural interest in monitoring and observing TLS traffic and configurations and kind of attitude across the globe. So for the past few years, we've been putting out a report that tracks just that. It tracks how many people are deploying a certain protocol or a certain cipher, how many of the old protocols and ciphers still being used, and so on. Now, the kind of key author, the main author of that report changed recently, and it's now in my hands. And so in doing it, we needed a new tool to actually start gathering data. And I looked around, and there were some pretty useful kind of open source tools on the web. I mean, some of them are fantastic. People, I'm sure, have heard of Nmap. There are other ones like zgrab and Zmap, which perform incredibly detailed or incredibly quick scans, but none of them really did what we wanted to do. A lot of them weren't reporting on certificate usage. Some of them couldn't scan for app layer headers. Some of them couldn't even still query with things like TLS 1.3. So it was a huge piece of very kind of manual, very labor-intensive work to kind of hand crank these tools to basically scan the web and to gather this data to help us produce this report. So what we ended up doing is we used for the report put out most recently in February, we did just that. We kind of hand cranked these tools. We grabbed the data that we could very manually and put it together. But we really needed a way to kind of automate the scanning, to get the data we wanted to automate the process of analyzing the data and just make it far more efficient. So we wanted to create a new tool. And this is when Katie came on board, and I'll let Katie kind of explain what she was doing. But the tool was really originally designed to be like an internal F5 Labs thing. It was something that we were going to use to scan the web, gather the data we wanted for our report, and do the jobs for us. And we realized halfway through that actually it was a pretty useful product we were building. And why didn't we just make it open source and kind of release it for everyone to use? And it was about this time that Katie joined. I forget the exact start date. It's been, 3 months already, Katie, I think?
Something like that. I stared in mid-May. Time has flown, certainly.
And not enough time. She'll be leaving us sort of fairly soon. We've just recently released kind of version 1.0 of Cryptonice, which we're super excited about. But there's loads more yet to do. So we're trying to convince Katie to come back in the future, or at least maybe continue to contribute in the true spirit of open source.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so as David mentioned, I'm pursuing a bachelor's of science in computer science. So I have a fair number of technical skills that I've kind of picked up along the way throughout my schooling. And when I arrived with, to the labs team, David and I were able to have some good conversations at the beginning where, he started kind of giving me a crash course in TLS as well, because I will admit I had never really heard of it too much or didn't know anything about it before actually starting. But we were able to have some super fruitful conversations about what he was looking for and the type of tool that was needed. And there were a couple other tools that, as he mentioned, kind of did exist online, but nothing that really fit our needs specifically. However, a really handy library that we were able to modularize is called sslyze. And this code provided a really, really great kind of initial first step for us to take when we were actually building our own tool, which I'm not sure if David has mentioned the name yet, but it's called Cryptonice, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a second. So we started with the sslyze API, working on modularizing some of that code. And then as we started to kind of format the output in a much more readable or usable way, and we had it collecting the data that we were hoping it was going to collect, we were also able to kind of think a little bit bigger and pick up some other modules along the way to scan for DNS data, HTTPS headers, and things like that. So now, as it currently stands, it exists as a Python library that can be downloaded or installed via pip. And then also the code is all available on GitHub as well. So if there are any users who were just curious about the code itself or how it worked, if they wanted to look a little bit deeper or, perhaps even fork it and make some of their own changes, that's all available as well.
Very cool. That's a really cool project to do as somebody that just started at F5 as an intern as well. Did you have you'd had some experience or some knowledge that you'd worked up through in the years at school so far?
Yeah, well, so we coded everything in Python, which really has become a universal language. And I've done a little bit of work with it through class, but I've never actually done any big project with it. I've mostly done coding in Java, C and C++. And then I've done data analytics work with R and a couple other languages as well. So I actually learned a ton throughout this project, spent a lot of time on Google figuring out what syntax errors I was getting or why, certain exceptions were being thrown. So I learned a lot, but I think what is the beauty of, computer science and programming is that if you know one language, especially an object-oriented language, it's very transferable, I think, and you can pick up other ones pretty quickly. And so I felt that way with Python and figuring out the libraries and, and I had never made a Python library before, so that was a new skill. So it's been great to have the opportunity to work on something so large that can hopefully have a big impact as well, really in a pretty short time span, and definitely starting from scratch with minimal or just kind of the basics of knowledge.
That's awesome. I will be voting for you to come back to F5 as well.
You may both.
Yeah. Cool. So I believe you were going to be able to, and if you have your screen that you can share, you're going to show us some things with.
Yeah, I'd love to. So if you want to, perfect. Share my.
That's a good resolution there.
Here.
As Katie gets this ready, I just want to kind of reiterate actually for anyone that is interested, because we've got quite a wide potential sort of set of users. So we really want to make it as accessible as possible to everyone. So there's a couple of kind of key users and use cases we wanted to capture. One is just the people that want us to do maybe ad hoc scans that just had a curiosity. What does their, how secure does their website look? What's the TLS configuration? Someone that's going to run the scans maybe ad hoc, once a day, once a week, or so on. So you've kind of made it easy to use the command line. We've even gone as far as now producing a standalone executable, so you can go to GitHub and actually download a full release. So you don't even need to have Python installed. But we wanted to go right the way through then to the more kind of DevSecOps users, whereby, as Cody mentioned, because we've now got a library, you can actually integrate the scans into your own code. So you can take the libraries, implement it into kind of CI/CD pipelines, and then depending on the output of the Cryptonice scans, maybe feed that back in and reconfigure a policy on maybe a load balancer or some kind of SSL termination device.
That's a really neat idea. Cool.
Yeah, so we definitely were pleased with the fact that it is so versatile and we can use it for what we want. Other people can use it as well. So what I wanted to demo today was how it could be installed as a library. So what I've gone ahead and done was create a virtual environment on my Mac. So as you can see, this means that there's nothing pre-installed. So we're going to go ahead and install Cryptonice onto the machine as well. So as you can kind of see populating the screen now are all of the other packages that are required to make this run. So we have the DNS Python library, URL-lib, the cryptography library is a super key one here. And if we were to check the pip list now, you can see we have all of these extra dependencies loaded in also. So the beauty of a command line tool is that you do not need to provide a whole lot of information, ideally. So this is going to run a scan on google.com. And as we can see here, it's doing some DNS resolution, fetching some information about HTTP headers, all of that. And then it actually will queue the TLS scans that we have kind of preloaded as the default scans and then produce this output here. And David, feel free to jump in here as well if there's anything particularly interesting you'd like to note about input. Google definitely has pretty good configuration, so they really don't have too much going on.
I think the thing I would wanted to point out really is why bother using Cryptonice, right? Because there are other scanners out on the web that do this kind of scan, produce this kind of report. A lot of them are hosted. I suspect a lot of people have heard of things like hardeneyes.com and sslyze.com. And they produce, fantastic looking kind of reports, HTML formatted. They give you grades, and so it's very, very easy for the layperson to understand, or to at least get an idea of how, what their strength looks like. But the couple of things that those kind of tools, hosted tools in particular, can't do is they don't currently scan, I think, for everything that is important for good holistic kind of HTTPS deployments, right? It's not just about having a good certificate with a big key, and it's not just about running TLS 1.3. It's what are the protocols that you're switching off? What are the ciphers you're switching off? What are the app layer headers? Are you using things like DNS CAA records to help kind of tighten the kind of or reduce the kind of threat vector of having any potential CA create certificates on your behalf? So there's additional scans we do above just TLS. But I suppose most importantly really is the fact that you can run this internally. So obviously one thing those tools can't do is go and scan an internal site. So it could be an intranet site, it could be a test site or development site. You're constantly working on code updates, and you're obviously pushing that to some private kind of deployment, some private IP. Clearly those hosted sites like Cryptonice can't go and access that. So that's a key advantage for us. So yeah, in terms of the kind of output, we'll maybe look at an example in a moment where things don't look so good, but we've tried to break it down so the console kind of output is reasonably high level. You'll get an idea of which of the protocols you're using, what was the preferred cipher for this particular handshake. We've got a quick look at the kind of the certificate expiry, whether it's valid and so on, and then things like whether DNS CAA records are using, and we'll check for things like HTTP to HTTP redirects as well. So the console output's fairly brief, but we'll look in a second. What we also then do is output to a JSON file with far more details. So we'll give you much more information about every single cipher for every protocol that's used, lots more details about the certificates, in terms of the entire certificate chain as well. So we can see, not just the lease certificate for Google, but what intermediary certificates are being returned as well to make sure they're all valid.
Yeah, so admittedly, this is not very readable output. Just initially, we do usually recommend that people have a JSON like beautifier formatter, but this is the output here where you can see that all of this data itself, is being collected. Like here's the certificate information. That's kind of all being parsed together in here, which is always nice and helpful. So
we made the decision to actually make it a kind of valid single line JSON kind of output. sslyze, I think by default actually. So as Katie mentioned, one of the core libraries will output JSON as well, but it will do it so that it's more human readable. So it's kind of multi-line and it's indented and so on. So you can literally open the document and read it. You can eyeball it basically. But that actually makes it more difficult to read programmatically. Whether you use things like JQ at the command line, whether you're reading it in through Python. Not that it's impossible, but sometimes some tools do struggle with it. Whereas, as I said, the main goal of this originally was for mass scanning, to make it hugely orchestratable and hugely kind of scalable. So that's why we've gone the single line. But again, as Katie said, it's a case of maybe just, for those that do want that, copying and pasting into a JSON beautifier, and you've got your human readable format then.
Yeah. So should we test out a potentially bad website as well? Okay. So I've gone to SSL Labs, where they allow you to test your servers, and they give you like the best sites that were recently scanned and then also the worst sites. So this was one of the worst sites. So see what we might be getting back from here. Sometimes these scans on sites that are maybe not as, they're not kept up quite as often, or they are have some issues with their configuration, can definitely take a little bit longer to run than the normal scan on google.com or GitHub. So we might be here for a quick second. But what we're hoping will happen, we've never tested this site before, so really you are getting the full live.
To explain what's happening, so we're running Cryptonice here with a bunch of default commands. So maybe we can take a look in a minute, Katie, at some of the command line parameters to see how you can customize it. So at the moment, we're running the majority of scans. So the first thing that we're doing is the basic kind of DNS check. So we're just resolving the host name to an IP address. We're then also checking for DNS CAA records to see if they exist. And we're then testing for, as well as headers, we're actually looking for redirects. So what we wanted to check on is a lot of sites will not necessarily have great TLS security on their kind of root site. And potentially that's intentional, because they will immediately redirect to another domain or a subdomain. And that subdomain might be configured correctly or with stronger TLS. So we follow redirects and then perform additional scans. But lots of these things that we do, the DNS lookups, the following redirects, they're all optional. So if you have a site that if you want to test a TLS connection before redirects happen, because that could be an angle, that could be a threat vector that a man in the middle could potentially intercept that initially unsecure connection before you're redirected. You can disable that, so you're testing the raw connection that the user would get when they use their browser.
Yeah, absolutely. So as David was just mentioning, all of these commands, if you were interested and you just wanted to look at all the options, you type Cryptonice-H, and then those will all be collected, and then there's a little bit more explanation as to what exactly it is that they do. So over here, what we are seeing, again, is a nicely finished scan. What's interesting here and potentially risky is that they're running TLS 1.0. The most current version is 1.3, which is considered, I guess, most secure. And then down here as well, David was working on adding some of these recommendations as well, which is a nice component that he's hoping to continue working on as well. So maybe David, you want to chat a little bit about some of these recommendations and why these were the first ones you went for?
Yeah, this is certainly, and this is very, I probably should have started this whole conversation by saying this is version 1.0. We're still, actively developing it. We're actively still working on it. It's by no means like completely feature complete. So these recommendations are something I started working on only a few days ago. There are lots more to add. So you probably see many things up there that you should flag a kind of warning or recommendation. So we're working on adding those. So these aren't complete yet. But yeah, at the moment, it's going to list out recommendations, things that steps you should take to improve your security. One that a lot of people will have, because I think in the last scans I did, only about 3.5% of the top 1 million sites were using DNS CA records. So there's a pretty good chance that if you run it against your own site, you're going to get that recommendation to use CA records. Other than that, we'll go through, we'll look at the protocols and ciphers and kind of recommend which ones are weak and why you should disable them. And we want to start, we'll start increasing the level of detail around the recommendations, not just TLS 1.0 isn't secure, you should disable it, but what are the steps you should take and why is it insecure? What's the exact vulnerability? And actually something we don't scan for by default that I'm not sure if I want to put Katie on the spot, although now I've said it out loud, I kind of am. By default, we don't scan for vulnerabilities. So we do have the capability to test for a number of TLS vulnerabilities. I think there's only around about 4 or so that we can test for at the moment. Things like Heartbleed, there's an OpenSSL, CVE, there's Robot that we can test for. And I probably don't have the recommendations yet for them either. So, but there are things you can test for, and we're going to be adding those kind of vulnerability tests, specifically, obviously, ones that are related to HTTPS and TLS.
Yeah. So what I've just gone ahead here and done is specified to run all TLS tests rather than just the default. So what you can see now here is for google.com, or pardon me, just these ones here. These are some of the tests that we will test for, and you can actually look at the configuration and see, for example, if it's vulnerable to Robot, vulnerable to Heartbleed, things like that. And some sites will be, some are not. Ideally, you want to not be vulnerable, but this is another good way to check that. And the last thing too, I know we're kind of running up on time here, but I think might be helpful to show if there are people who are curious about using this in their own code is you can call, because it's a library, you can call specific modules on your own. So for example, this here was a really small script that I wrote that allowed you to call, instead of the whole library, you would just call this one script particularly, and you could specify a dictionary of the commands you wanted to run if you didn't want to go look at all of the specific command line parameters. And then it would write the output to a JSON file, and this is calling, well, as you can see from the very top here, it's calling in the scanner module, it's calling 2 functions, write to JSON file and scanner file. So this is another way that you can actually call the library as well, and it'll produce the same output to the console, but instead, if you wanted to customize a little bit more, or maybe you wanted to include something like this within a program and send the domain name along to check, you could do this without necessarily needing to call the tool from the command line itself.
Very cool. And don't feel like you have to, shut things down right away. Feel free to, keep going if you have more stuff to show. I think everybody will get a lot of value out of it. I had a question. So it's on GitHub. Are you guys taking feature requests via issues, filing issues? Are you guys taking in pull requests if people have some stuff to contribute to it?
Yes, all of the above.
Cool.
We are definitely welcoming bugs and enhancement requests. After we released it, I guess a week ago or a week and a half ago, we definitely started getting some requests from people because they were running into a couple of incompatibility problems, or other things that they were checking, seeing that something was being listed as a recommendation and they weren't sure why. So that's been super helpful for us as well to actually continue working on the project, especially because I work on a Mac, David works on Windows. So one of the things that we had come across initially was that it wasn't working as well on the Linux system. So we've been working on piecing through that problem, and then also building a Windows executable, which we were able to do recently, which is nice. So we definitely welcome the issues and the bugs because it'll only make this better.
Yeah, we managed to get, we're very keen to not only get contributions from the open source community, but try and resolve at least these kind of initial teething issues as soon as possible. There was an issue actually we presented to on a public webinar just last week on the latest TLS telemetry report and Cryptonice, and it was great. We had a lot of kind of interest, people going and downloading the tool and trying it out straight away, which is exactly what we wanted. And I think one of the initial bugs that was found was that if DNS CAA records were configured on a subdomain that had a CNAME alias, it wasn't querying it properly. So we managed to fix that, within a day or so. And the user was, super happy that it works, and he downloaded it, and it's all good. So yeah, we're kind of actively still maintaining it and looking for issues. One of the first, the two main things I think at the moment that we were asked for on day one was were distributables for those that didn't have Python and just wanted to test it out. So we've kind of ticked that box. And as Katie said, the other one was Linux support, because clearly, if we're targeting DevOps and DevSecOps users, a lot of enterprise environments are going to be running some flavor of Linux. So we're very much working on that. We've got Ubuntu 20.04 support confirmed, so that's all good. We're working on older versions of Ubuntu, and CentOS is kind of next on the list. In a lot of cases, we're kind of hamstrung by our dependencies, and such is the kind of life of open source developers, where you're reusing libraries and so on. You obviously have these dependencies on other people. So we're seeing what we can do, because I think CentOS is going to be the next big ask, to be honest. But again, it's open source, right? So absolutely submit bugs on the issues page, fork it, submit pull requests, and we'd love to get active code contributions from the community.
Very cool. I can already see a bunch of stars and forks on here, people watching it. Yeah, pretty cool.
We're kind of actively. I'll send a link. I don't know if that's a private chat we have. Maybe we can send it afterwards. There's so we've got to read the docs page as well. So there's some very basic kind of documentation on the GitHub site. I think I've just sent that to you, Booz. I don't know if you can share that possibly. I think you can just Google Cryptonice, and you should see read the doc thing sort of fairly high up. So we, again, actively kind of adding that. We're building it out. I wouldn't say that the documentation is 100% complete, but we're working towards it. We're a fairly small team, obviously, so adding to it as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Very cool. I'm interested to see, I'm sure in some months from now, there'll be even more features. So we'd love to have you guys on again, potentially Katie, depending on how things are with you and where you end up. But yeah. Yeah, really, really cool. Thank you for sharing that, not only on here, but just sharing a tool like that in general. Really cool. I can already see so many ways that this is helpful, like being able to run internally. I know when I spin up a demo environment for people in Azure or AWS, and it's running something like ASM where we can visibly see things that are coming in, it's pretty much immediate that people start scanning.
Yes.
On those public cloud instances. So being able to run this stuff internally, I know for folks that I talk to, that'll be hugely helpful. So cool. Alrighty, folks, I will let you guys go from there. But thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
And we'll see folks on Friday is our next stream. All right. Bye for now. Thanks for checking this out today. If you're watching via YouTube right now, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Also click the bell for notifications. That way you will find out when we are dropping a new video or when we're going live. Also, there's darylandboo.com. If you head over to that, leave your name and email address, we will drop a weekly technical newsletter in your inbox every Monday. Also, this is available via podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. Head over to one of those, hit subscribe, and you'll be able to listen to us in the car on your commute or during a walk or a run. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.